There is a common belief that many politicians are corrupt, and numerous instances have supported this perception. In this video, we will discuss 10 politicians who faced trials and were subsequently convicted and sentenced to prison. It's important to note that we won't be covering cases of imprisonment or execution resulting from a revolution or a coup. Stay tuned. Silvio Berlusconi. Silvio Berlusconi, the former Prime Minister of Italy, faced legal issues primarily related to tax fraud and bribery. He was accused of using offshore companies to purchase broadcasting rights for his media empire, Mediaset, and subsequently avoiding taxes. The bribery charges were linked to payments made to a senator to switch political allegiance. In 2013, he was convicted and initially sentenced to 4 years in prison. However, due to an amnesty law, his sentence was later reduced to 1 year. Berlusconi's legal saga saw multiple changes, with sentences often subject to appeals. Ultimately, he served community service instead of prison time. Chen Shui-Bian. Chen Shui-Bian, the former president of Taiwan, faced corruption and money laundering charges. Allegations included receiving kickbacks and taking bribes during his presidency. The charges were part of a broader anti-corruption campaign in Taiwan. In 2009, he received a life sentence, subsequently reduced to 20 years. Chen was eventually released on medical parole in 2015. Chen's supporters have claimed that his trial and sentencing were politically motivated retribution by the Kuomintang for his win in 2000 election, ending the one-party system in the country. Alberto Fujimori. Alberto Fujimori, the former president of Peru, was charged with human rights abuses and corruption. The human rights abuses included orchestrating death squad killings to combat insurgents, while the corruption charges were linked to embezzlement and bribery. He fled to Japan in 2000 and later attempted to resign via fax from there. He maintained a self-imposed exile until his arrest while visiting Chile in 2005. In 2009, he was sentenced to 25 years in prison. In December 2017, Fujimori was pardoned by President Pedro Pablo Kuczynski. The pardon was overturned by Peru's Supreme Court in 2018, and Fujimori was sent back to prison in January 2019. The Constitutional Court of Peru reinstated the pardon in 2022. Finally, he was released in late 2023. Moshe Katsav. Moshe Katsav, the former president of Israel, faced serious charges of sexual harassment and rape. The allegations came from several female employees during his time as a government minister and president. In 2010, Katsav was convicted on charges of rape, sexual harassment, and obstruction of justice, leading to a 7-year prison sentence. Despite maintaining his innocence, his appeal was rejected in 2011. In 2012, he began serving his sentence. He was released under restrictive conditions in 2016, having served 5 years of his sentence. Imran Khan. Imran Khan, a former cricketer and politician, served as Prime Minister of Pakistan from 2018 to 2022. In 2023, he was convicted of corruption and sentenced to 3 years in prison. The charges stemmed from his alleged sale of a valuable watch given to him by Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. In August 2023, a Pakistani appeals court suspended Khan's 3-year prison term and granted him bail. However, Khan remains incarcerated in connection with a diplomatic cipher case where he stands accused of leaking state secrets and violating the Official Secrets Act. Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva. Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, known as Lula, served as Brazil's president from 2003 to 2010. His legal issues revolved around corruption charges related to Operation Car Wash. Accused of accepting bribes in the form of a beachfront houses renovations allegedly provided by companies seeking government contracts, Lula was convicted in 2017. He was initially sentenced to 9.5 years, but subsequent trials increased his prison term. In 2018, Lula began serving his sentence, but in 2021, the Supreme Federal Court annulled his convictions, citing jurisdictional issues. This decision restored Lula's political rights, allowing him to run for office again. Subsequently, he won the 2022 presidential election and became president of Brazil again. Park Geun-hye. Park Geun-hye, the former president of South Korea, was impeached and convicted on charges of corruption and abuse of power. The legal troubles stemmed from her involvement in a massive corruption scandal that included influence peddling through a close confidant, Choi Soon-sil, who had undue influence over state affairs. In 2018, Park was sentenced to 25 years in prison and fined millions of dollars. In late 2021, it was announced that she would receive a pardon on compassionate grounds from South Korean President Moon Jae-in. Later, she was released from prison. Ivo Sanader. Ivo Sanader, the former Prime Minister of Croatia, was charged with corruption related to accepting bribes and kickbacks. The charges were linked to various business deals, including the purchase of a state-owned company. In 2012, he was sentenced to 10 years in prison. In 2015, the verdict was quashed by the Constitutional Court based on procedural errors made during the trial. He was released after spending nearly 5 years both in custody and prison. However, his legal troubles continued, and Sanader was later sentenced to a total of 18 years in prison for 3 other cases. Subsequently, he was imprisoned once again and is currently serving his sentence. Yulia Tymoshenko. Yulia Tymoshenko, a former Prime Minister of Ukraine, faced charges of abuse of power and embezzlement related to a natural gas deal with Russia. The prosecution argued that she had abused her powers by approving the deal, causing financial losses to the state. In 2011, she was sentenced to 7 years in prison. Timoshenko's case garnered international attention, with claims that her conviction was politically motivated. She was released from prison in 2014 following the Revolution of Dignity. Khaleda Zia. Khaleda Zia, the former Prime Minister of Bangladesh, was convicted of corruption in 2018. The charges were specifically related to embezzling funds from an orphanage trust. The court found her guilty of abusing powers as the Prime Minister while disbursing a fund in favor of the newly formed Zia Orphanage Trust. She was sentenced to a total of 17 years in prison. Numerous international and domestic legal experts believed that the case was a political ploy to remove her from the electoral process. These were 10 politicians who have been sentenced to prison. Is there anyone you think we missed on this list? Comment your suggestions below. Thank you for watching. If you found this content informative, please like it and subscribe to our channel. We'd love to hear from you, so feel free to share your thoughts, comments, and ideas for future topics in the comment section. Thank you for joining, and we look forward to seeing you in the next video.